welcome to the Thriving Writer Show. On today's show, I have an author, a speaker, and a serial entrepreneur who has sold 1.5 million books. Honoree Corder, welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. First question is, how did you get started as a writer, and how did you know that's what you wanted to do?
Oh gosh. So I got started as a writer because Mark Victor Hansen, who you'll know is the co-creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, was unimpressed with my answer to what do you do, which was at the time coaching and speaking. And he said, oh, everybody is a coach and a speaker. You must write a book. And so I said, gee, how hard could that be? And set out to write my book so that I could have what books give every professional: credibility and authority and a platform and all those wonderful things. It wasn't until years later, after I had written several books, that I decided to become a full-time author, or try to. I failed miserably at that. I still do lots of things, but that was the goal when I turned 40, was to, within 5 years' time, become a full-time author. And I was able to do that sort of by the time I was 43. And then I just keep trying to retire, but that's not going very well. But thankfully, I'm very grateful for everything. So
that's awesome.
Yes.
I'm sort of on my path as well. I'm well past 40, but yeah, I'm not letting that stop me. And I'm encouraged by what you've been able to accomplish, for sure.
Awesome.
So what's the key to finding your voice and writing something that people want to read?
Oh gosh, you have these big stacked questions I like. Well, the first thing about finding your own voice is to write until you find your own voice, however long that takes. It's just putting words on paper until you're not saying something. I think it's very much like when I was a coach. Initially, I think the first 5 years of being a coach, people don't really know what they're doing. At least I didn't. And so you're parroting what someone else said. You're passing on nuggets of wisdom from someone else. And then eventually you find your own rhythm and your own voice, and you start to give advice in your own words. You start to use your own examples of success and those sorts of things in what you're saying to someone. And it was no different for me in writing. I had been coaching a number of years by the time I started writing, so I was writing in my own voice, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think finding your own voice is just writing and writing and writing until you find yourself saying something only the way you would say it. And then how do you write something that others want to read? I don't know if there's a correct answer to that, but my answer to that is be authentically yourself in your writing. And because people find themselves in other people, we find each other in our stories. So we find encouragement and motivation and inspiration in what other people are able to do. And we find consolation and comfort in understanding that other people have pain that is similar to or the same as ours. I think that the reason my earlier books resonated with people was not that I was a polished writer. I don't even know that I am now, but I write in my own voice, and I write very authentically, and I share from my spirit and my heart. And I think that's what I hear, right? That's what I hear that people like about my writing, is I'm very direct, and I try to be funny and entertaining, but also educational, but real. Just here's what I know, here's what I don't know, here's my experience, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think people appreciate that kind of authenticity, for sure. I mean, the people I know and interact with personally, I like because they're real. And I think that's a great, for sure.
Yes.
So I guess the question is, now that I've laid that big claim out at the beginning, is how did you go from 0 to 1 million?
Well, I didn't know what I didn't know in the beginning. So I didn't know that selling lots of books was something that indie authors with no writing classes or degrees did. So no one told me I couldn't do it. So I did it. And then I didn't talk about it because I didn't think it was a big deal. And then later when I shared numbers with people, they were kind of impressed with my numbers. So the first answer to that is, when I talked to Mark Victor Hansen, one of the things that he said to me, one of the nuggets of wisdom, was do 7 things for your book every day. So back in the day, what that meant was get featured in your local newspaper or the press, the things that we wouldn't do now because we know that those don't move the needle, right? But I made a list of 7 things to do every day. And one of them was to ask, one of the things that he said, one specific tactic was to, and this is nonfiction, I don't think this works in fiction, but in nonfiction, he said, call everyone you know and ask them if they would like to buy between 10 and 100 copies of your book. And so while the book was publishing, also known as I had uploaded the files to a printer many states away and I was waiting for them to print it and send it to me. Okay? So the publishing of the book was happening. I had about 3 to 4 weeks. And so every day I would get on the phone and I would call people and I would say, I have this new book coming out and this is the title and this is what it's about. And it's for middle management, senior management, salespeople, and you, my friend, who would buy between 10 and 100 copies because you want to buy my book. And I ended up selling 11,000 copies of the book in that 3 weeks. So I ordered 5,000 books and then I ordered another 5,000 books and then I ordered another 5,000 books. And then I was using the book as a business card. And so passing it out and passing it out and passing it out. So after that, I stopped keeping track of the physical copies. And that was right, a year or 2 before Kindle came in the picture. And so I knew people had bought the book on Kindle, but it wasn't until 5 or 6 years later when I decided, I think I'll give this writing thing a try and write more and more books, that I went back and researched how many books I had sold. So that was more of a fun game than watching the grass grow, right? Like, I think if I started now, like, I sold 2 books today, wah, wah, I don't know that would be very fun. But when I went back and did my first tally, it was over 800,000 total of ebook, paperback, and audiobook.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. I know I played the check the stats game a lot, at least when I was first starting out. And it was fun, but then it could be just sort of like a rat trap, I guess.
Yes. If you do well one day, you're flying high. And then the next day, it's like, how did I sell 82 books yesterday and 4 today? What's happened? Right. Yeah. And you can take yourself. Yes, I totally get it. I understand the crack, right? Our crack may not be street crack. It could be, math.
Or social media.
Or social media. Yes. It's a rabbit hole for sure.
Oh, yes. Well, let me ask you this. I've talked with some fiction writers, and some of them seem to think that fiction writers can't succeed as self-publishers. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, I belong to a Facebook group called 20 Books to 50K, and it was founded by a gentleman named Michael Anderle. Are you familiar with Michael?
I haven't heard of him.
Oh, good. I will be delighted to introduce you to Michael. So he set a goal originally. So 20 Books to 50K was his idea, was to write 20 books that would earn him $50,000 a year so he could move to Mexico and live high on the hog. And I think he probably makes $50,000 a week now.
Wow.
He's done many collaborations, has many books. I follow him on Amazon and I'm almost ready to stop because every week I get new release from Michael Anderle and there's like 4, 5, 6 books that come out because he's now a publishing machine. But he originally figured out that he could write these books and market them, write them, publish them well, right? Indistinguishable from traditional publishing is my mantra. And then market them effectively, Facebook ads, Amazon ads, building your email list, all of the things, right? Mm-hmm. So he makes a very good living. Very often in that group, there is a post from someone who is posting what they made specifically in the last week or so, what they made in 2017. And it is 100,000, 200,000, 500,000. And these are all indie authors who then say, why do we keep hearing we can't make money as an author?
Right.
Here is my screenshot of book report and here is the money. that I have made from however many books. I mean, it's, you know, January 1 to December 31, how many books and how much money they made. And it's for some people, they made $30,000, but that's, I think from what I understand of traditional publishing, that's actually pretty standard in traditional publishing if your book does really well.
Wow.
So I think, and I'm not a fiction writer yet, I'm working on a project, but I think I can make money as a fiction writer. I'm doing it for fun, but I'm also going to do it well. So if it strikes a chord, it will also make some money. I'm a businesswoman. So
Sure.
we'll see if the thing that I think is fun is actually could be profitable. I don't know. We'll see. But I have 20 friends on speed dial who are full-time authors, and 2 of my co-authors for 2 of my book series are full-time fiction writers where we collaborated on projects. They're full-time 6-figure fiction authors that are indie all the way to the ground.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So can anyone join this group that you just talked about? Or?
Yes. Yeah. 20, the number 20 books, and then TO, and then 50K. Anybody can join the group. And I highly suggest that you, if you're watching this and you are an aspiring full-time author, then jump in there and ask that question, because you'll get a lot of people raising their hand and saying, yes, I made 24,000 or I made 2.4 million.
Wow.
From my writing, fiction, nonfiction combination. And some people are hybrid. Some people are trad that went indie, and then there are some that did so well as indies that trad came calling.
Yeah.
Yes, we would like to write you a big check.
That's cool. And we'll be sure to include that in the show notes when we post it.
Awesome.
All right. I see that you have collaborated on some books. You talked about that. What's the keys to a good partnership if you're going to do something like that?
Equality and understanding and a good legal agreement, right? Good fences make good neighbors. Mm-hmm. So equality, meaning that both people don't have to have the same skill set, but they have to be at the same level, and they have to have the same level of commitment. Communication is key. This is what I'm going to do. This is when I'm going to do it. And this is how you'll know, and vice versa. And then also I have seen some people just like in marriage and in business where they kind of write things on the back of a napkin or think they both understand how things are supposed to go. And everyone's in love at the beginning and don't put together a legal agreement. I have legal agreements with all of my co-authors and all of my collaborations. And the great thing is that once we hammered everything out with the advice of a professional, we've never had to reference those agreements. I've never had to pull them up again.
That's great.
To reference them. So that, I think that means I've made some good choices, which is also selection is key in any relationship, friendship, love relationship, or business relationship. Who you choose is key, and making sure that you are both excited about the project and willing to work really hard and invest more time, money, and energy than you both think at the beginning, and see it all the way through to the end. Because unlike getting divorced, doing a divorce with intellectual property is really tough.
Oh man. And you probably know about that, since I see you've written some things about divorce.
I have written things about personal divorce, but I have seen people who collaborated without an agreement and then got into a fight, and then no one's right in that kind of a situation. Like, each person thinks that they're 100% right. And as they try to go separate ways, unfortunately, copyright outlives everybody by a long time. And so trying to extricate yourself from another person when you didn't form a company, get bank accounts, and somebody has to pay someone, if someone's trusting someone else with their royalties, you have to really know that you can trust the person who's supposed to pay you and that they're going to be honorable.
Sure.
And yes, and then if you say, forget it, I want out, then that's really tough.
Yeah.
So just be careful. Be careful, and then once you've chosen and you're ready to do it, then just do it, because it's great. I have, so many co-authors. three main people that I collaborate with, and then several other people I've co-written books with. And fortunately for me, all of the experiences have gone really well and have been very positive. And so I highly recommend it.
Well, great.
Yes.
And the one thing that jumped out to me was that, yeah, it's good to have everything laid out so everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it. And I think, if you can agree on that, sure, then maybe you will never have to have anything ugly happen.
Right. And if there is a disagreement, and that's not to say that every moment has been singing, lullabies and braiding each other's hair and unicorns and rainbows, there have been moments where there have been conversations, but those conversations require good communication. It's like, hey, I thought this was going to happen by then. Correct me if I'm incorrect. Like, how can we work through this? And then just, okay, it didn't happen. So how are we going to move forward, kind of thing, right? It's being able to communicate with someone without that fear of them getting mad or retaliating or saying, forget it, I'm going to take my bat and go home. Then what do you do?
Yeah.
In that instance, then you have to pull out the legal agreement. That's why doing all of that agreeing up front, so everything's in writing with, an attorney who knows what they're doing. And I have, fortunately, my background is in business coaching and executive coaching. So I coached a lot of attorneys. So when I needed one, I had a bench. So I found someone who was so good that now my partners use him as well, which is great. Yeah, and he kind of asks all those questions at the beginning that you're never thinking about when you're, young and in love and you're going to be together forever, right? You're not thinking about, well, what happens if? It's like, oh, wait. So that's very helpful.
Great. Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, you teach authors to treat their books as a business tool, and I guess maybe that might not be the best way to say it, and I'm thinking of what are some ways that you can use a book to maybe repackage it and create new offerings and build a business out of it.
Sure. So yes, I'm using your book as a tool as opposed to looking at it as your baby. A lot of people are like, this is my book and it's my baby. It's like, no, that is a revenue generating piece of your business that should be out there generating revenue. And I love your question, which is how you're talking about repurposing the content. So in terms of a nonfiction book is a message at its core. So you can take pieces of the message and break it up and use it in pieces as smaller books or manuals or that sort of thing. My book, Vision to Reality, was originally meant as a companion guide for my 100-day executive coaching program. I actually wrote it so I could stop explaining to people on their dime why I was asking them to do what they were doing. And then when I gave it to a small group of people, they said, this is actually quality information people would find interesting. You should release this as a book. So there's the book, there's the course, there was the coaching program, and then ultimately there was the keynote presentation, and then the workshop. You can take nonfiction book information and repurpose it into lots of different things. So the how is a bigger question. It really depends on what do you want from your business? What's the, what is your outcome? What are you trying to build? If you're a speaker trying to build your speaking business, then you need to have a book that's based on your keynote or a portion thereof. It doesn't hurt to have a course. Courses are very big. I think they've always been big. They're getting bigger because they're easier to do. So I don't know if you have a follow-up question, but it's not hard to do it. It just requires some forethought and some strategy around ultimately where are you going as a business person.
Yeah. So if you had a course, for example, what could you do with that as far as maybe provide services, or maybe it leads to some other kind of maybe more one-on-one type of thing? I know course is generally a standalone. Maybe the way I'm thinking about it is more of a standalone thing. How would you envision that working out?
Well, I think I've toyed with turning my book, You Must Write a Book, into a course. I did You Must Write a Book, and then I did the companion workbook, I Must Write My Book. I've toyed with turning that into a course because it's the missing middle piece to my business. And because I do one-on-one coaching with people who want to write a nonfiction book and they don't want to figure out all of the things.
Yeah.
Right? They want to have someone who's done it a few times to walk them through the process. And even, I introduce my clients to my bench of providers, which is something that I don't do for just anybody. So that's how I envision a course would fit in to my business if I chose to do it. It could be that a course would set someone up to get that one-on-one higher paid information, because a course is general information. A book is general information. It's the most I can tell you, Frank, about you must write a book, and here's everything I can tell you, you being a complete stranger, and I knew nothing about your life and your business and your history and your experience. But if I had time with you, then my information, my advice would go several levels deeper. So the course could be that in between middle piece where there are some additional modules, and then saying, listen, if you really want to go deep on this and get, the best advice for you, then there's that one-on-one option.
Yeah, great. That's kind of what I had in mind, and you explained it well. So
Awesome.
Appreciate that.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see authors making now to get their books out there?
There are a number of people that talk about writing and publishing your book in 30 days or 90 days. And yes, you can absolutely do that. I'm not sure that it can go through the steps that I put my books through and that I recommend people put their books through in order to create a quality product that's going to be not just a best-selling book, but a best-earning book. And a book that people pass on. I recently met someone, it's so funny, I went to a family birthday party and someone said, oh, Honoree is an author. And I was like, oh no. So I end up sitting at the bar in this house with this gentleman, and he has a fiction book. And, he's done this analysis where it's supposed to be just like Clancy's books, like it's 97%, 93%, 95% Clancy, his book, right? So it's right there, and it's supposed to be awesome. And the cover art was okay, except the cover design could have been better. But he sends me a copy of the book, and I, of course, now feel obligated to read it. And as soon as I opened it up, I understood why in 3 years he had 8 reviews. He had sold 800 or 900 copies, but only 8 people had reviewed it, because when you've only sold that many copies, that means it's your friends and family. And your friends and family are not going to say, I stopped reading your book because there was a typo on line 1, on line 3, on line 7. So it had not been edited. Even though he said I had it edited, there are different levels of editors. So mistakes I see people making are trying to rush through the process, or getting what I call publish fatigue, where that last 10% feels like the last 50%, where you're like, oh, can I just get this baby out already? I'm 40,000 weeks pregnant and I'm ready for it just to be out. It's like, you have to, in my opinion, if you want it to sell now and forever, just take a little bit of time, save up if you need to for the service providers. You need a book designer, a formatter, an editor, a proofreader, just the basic things that you would do if you were running a legitimate business. And not that this is an illegitimate business, but if you were running another business, you wouldn't say, well, I want to have a McDonald's, but I want to use, horse meat instead of cow meat, right? Like, you wouldn't try to do everything on the cheap. You would do it according to a standard, is my point. So I see people rushing and then trying to do things low budget or on the cheap and speedy. And unfortunately, it shows. It's so evident. And then they've put all this effort into writing a book, and writing a book is hard. There's so many easier ways to spend your time or your money, or, or to try to earn money. If you're going to do it well, go all the way and do it. And then you will be glad. And I don't say any of that with judgment. First, you will be glad that you did it in the way that I'm recommending. And I'm not saying any of it with judgment. I've made all of the mistakes that, so it's like, do I see other people making mistakes? And you'll see I have one finger pointing out and 3 fingers pointing back at myself, because I've made every single mistake. I started self-publishing in a time when self-publishers were really losers. Like, it was not done and it was not talked about, and I was figuring it out. So I made all of the mistakes. And every time someone would go, hey, you know, there's a typo on your back cover, it's like, oh dear, okay, so let's do that again. Right. So those are just the common mistakes that I think can easily be avoided with a little more time and money and patience. And that's what I set when I'm working with someone. I set the expectation. This is what these services will cost you. They could cost less, but here's about what you would expect to spend. And here's how long it takes. It takes an editor about 3 weeks to edit your book. So while that's happening, go and do some marketing. Hey, marketing.
Yes.
Because that's phase 2 of your book's life, which lasts until you die, right? Marketing started yesterday and it lasts until you take your last breath. So there's a lot of that to get done.
Yeah. You remind me of the first time I published a book. I probably did something even worse. I used a vanity publisher to publish mine. And I spent a year writing it. I had it edited, and it probably wasn't the greatest book in the world. I sold 12 copies because when it came to part 2, I was tired.
Yes.
And I had no plan, and it just didn't happen. So.
Right. Well, now you have that knowledge, and you could probably go back and take that book and give it a refresh and republish it with the knowledge that you have today, which thank goodness for do-overs, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Love the do-over. Okay. So, when we're talking about marketing, what are some inexpensive and effective ways for somebody who is new and maybe has a small budget to get the attention that they need for their books?
Well, so tell me what you mean by attention.
Well, I guess maybe in social media, or I'm using a Facebook group myself, just things like that.
Awesome. So sometimes when people say attention, they mean media attention. So I'll set that aside and say that, yes, I have a book called The Prosperous Writer's Guide to Finding Readers, and it has about 150 ways to market your book. And I say I'm a scrappy farm girl from Ohio with, not a big fancy education and not lots of money. So I started with what you're talking about, which is not doing Facebook groups because that was before my time, but having books on hand and sharing those books one-on-one. The number one way people hear about a book is from someone else. Someone saying, have you read my most recent book is 10% Happier by Dan Harris. It's about mindfulness and meditation. He's funny. It's a great book. And I loved it. And so that's the book that I'm talking about right now, is like, have you read 10% Happier? No, I haven't. Okay. If you like nonfiction, if you've ever wanted to meditate, this is the book for you. That's the number one way people hear about books, is from sharing it. So always have a book on you. 2 of the things that I did initially and still do to this day, I just got back from a 2-week road trip where I went through 6 states and I went to about 87 Starbucks, is I reverse stock Starbucks. So, when you go into a Starbucks and they have the newspaper basket, so they've got the newspaper stand where you can buy the newspaper, and then they have the basket for people that have read a newspaper and stuck it in there. I will leave my books in the Starbucks.
Oh.
For someone to find them. So I'm several states away and I've left my book there for someone to stumble upon, hopefully that they like. So I leave it in Starbucks, but also in other coffee shops. I used to put them in bookstores when there were more bookstores. I would reverse stock them and then put my card in them. And when someone would go to buy the book and it wasn't in the system, the bookstore would call me and say, someone wants to buy this. What should we do? It's like, well, give them the book, but here's how you can order some from me. Now there's Create Space, right, which has that expanded distribution. So that is how my books have gotten stocked in bookstores. Podcasts are a really good way to talk about your book. So if you're a nonfiction author, then go on podcasts that highlight your area of expertise, a la our conversation today. If you are a fiction writer, then go on podcasts for fiction or for fiction writers in that genre. So mysteries or romance or whatever, or start a podcast and interview other authors and give them exposure. Lots of different things you can do. I use Facebook a lot. I have a Facebook group for writers. It's called the Prosperous Writer Mastermind on Facebook. And it's based around my Prosperity for Writers book series, which is for writers and how they can get the mindset of someone who can make a living as a writer. Because I saw a lot of people, what inspired me to write the original book and then the series, where I saw a lot of writers saying, oh, you can't make money as a writer. And I would go, look, this number at the bottom, that on my tax return, that is real money. You can make money as a writer, and I have no pedigree. So if I can do it, you can do it. And it always starts with mindset. So the first thing is always like, hey, go find other writers that are making money. And if they can do it, then you can do it. You just have to have the behaviors and the actions of writers, writing and marketing, and that sort of thing. So Facebook is a really good place to drip. And I actually am now in several authors' advanced reader teams Facebook groups. So when they're putting together what I call the advanced reader team, you join their art. And then when they have a new book coming out, you get notified on Facebook, and then you get access to the book. You can also have a fan club, which is for your readers, which is totally different. My friend Julie Huss, who writes under J.A. Huss, very successful romance writer, she has Shrike Bikes, which is her group, and she never changed the name because it was so big and so successful that it's one of the most interesting Facebook groups. And then my business partner, Hal Elrod, in the Miracle Morning Facebook community, I think the last time I looked was like 150,000 people, I think between 110 and 150,000 and growing. I'm an admin, and every day there are 100 or 200 new people asking just to join the group. So you can use Facebook as a way to create your group and ultimately then take those people and put them on your email list. Also a low budget way to collect your people and then communicate with them, because ultimately your email list is the only thing over ultimately what you will have control. Right now we can use Facebook and set up a group and go to town. I'm not sure that will always be the case. I hope it is, but I'm not sure that it will be.
Yeah.
So I hope that was enough.
Yeah, that was quite helpful.
Awesome.
And I'm thinking with the show as well, maybe having a group to funnel people into and then just go deeper with and talk about the things that, like say you and I talk about, or whoever's on the show will talk about. And it just seems like a good way to maybe keep the conversation going and just to grow my own business and things like that. So.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this. How can a writer create a book that's easier to sell? Are there certain things that they can do to make it easier on themselves when it comes time to market the book?
Yes. Chris Fox has a book series as well. And one of the books in that book series is called Right to Market. And some people are like, I want to be true to myself and I want to write the story that I want to write. And yet I think readers expect certain tropes when they're reading a book. They're expecting a happy ending, a happily ever after in a romance novel. So you can't expect a successful romance book if ultimately there isn't a happily ever after at the end. We got to get together. We have to be in love. Okay. That's the rule. In mystery, there's a certain thing. And in thriller, there's a certain thing. And then there are the acts, right? There's the inciting event. And so people expect certain things out of a story. And if they don't get it, they won't like it. I know from my very little fiction writing experience, you have to have certain things in your book in order to get people to read it and then to keep them reading. And I know that there are certain books that I love to read and I can't put them down because they give me what I want in that type of a story. As far as nonfiction is concerned, for me, it's being authentic and it's creating high content, information that's usable by the reader, that it's simple enough that the reader can digest it, and it has a certain, at least for the books that I write, it has a certain, hey, you can totally do this even if you've never done it before ness to it. Like the you can do itness part of it, that is very important to in a nonfiction book, because you don't want to read a book about how everyone else lost 50 pounds but you're going to stay fat, sorry, or everyone else is going to get rich but you're going to stay poor, sorry. And so that's what I find in nonfiction books, is to create a conversation with your reader and then to write to one person so that every person feels like they're the person that's being written to in the book.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I know even after talking to you, I can sense that I can do more things than I could before we started talking. So,
yay. I love that. I love that.
That's great. I love that. Okay. Well, since you are where you are now, looking back, would you have done anything differently than you did?
Which thing? How long do we have? Is this a 7-hour podcast? You know what I did very poorly for a very long time was ask myself what I wanted from my books and what I wanted my books to do for the reader, and what I wanted the reader to do and what I wanted the reader not to do. And then what did I want the book to do for me? Where did the book fit into my business? I didn't know to ask those questions, and so I didn't do a lot of pre-planning. I now get a lot of, so Honoree, I heard you on this podcast, or so-and-so told me that you helped them. And so my book is like 95% written. What do I need to do? And it's like, oh dear. You missed the first 4 steps of the process. So you've probably created a book that's not going to do for you what you want it to do. And it's not going to do what you want it to do at all, right? It's just basically going to sit there and be an exercise in futility, which would be sad. So for me, I would go back and be much more intentional with my books. I got very lucky with my first book, Tall Order, in that I had enough advice to do it enough right that I sold copies, but I still had to do it over before I ever sold those 11,000 copies. Like the first version of my first book was a bonfire. So I had a bonfire with those copies. When I had the cover redone, because I met another author and he was like, oh dear God, Honoree, what have you done? Let me help you. So he pointed me enough in the right direction. And I used my book as a business card, but I didn't know to put certain things in the book that would help the right person, meaning the person who could be a good client for me, find me.
Yeah.
Now I know to put in books that I write, if appropriate, a way for people to kind of sort themselves in or out of having more conversations with me. So when you're writing a nonfiction business book and you're using it as a business card, you want to have enough information in there that anyone who reads it walks away and says, wow, that was worth my $5, $10, $15. Like that was money well spent. And the person who could be a good client for you is going to say, you know, screw the $15. Here's my American Express card. Like this whole thing that I need to do, just do that for me and let me know how much I owe you. Right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So there are some people who have read one or another of my books and then they've called me up and just said, I don't want to figure this out. You're hired. The end.
Wow.
But more often than not, way more often than not, a lot of people read, for example, You Must Write a Book. And then they say, I didn't think I could write a book. I read that book. Now I'm writing my book and I just want you to know, and I'm really excited about it. And that's awesome also.
Oh,
that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, it's a great feeling when somebody says that about your work.
Oh my gosh, so much. Such a good feeling.
Yeah. And you reminded me when I was first writing some of my books, I was changing things too, because the beauty of a digital book is it's not set in stone. I mean, if it flops, then you can tweak and tweak and tweak until that thing, does what you want it to do. So,
that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely not the case with printed books, right? At least
well,
not cheap.
Yes, you can now. You just upload a new version to CreateSpace. Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So is there any final words you want to leave with the audience today?
Oh, just if you are a writer in your heart and it's your passion, don't ever stop writing. Don't ever give up. there's someone who wants to read this book or the next book or the next book or whatever you're writing. And so if you have people who say, oh, you can't do that, or there's no money in that, or that's silly, don't listen. Those people are mean. Light them on fire and keep writing.
Yes.
Not really, because then you'll be in jail and you won't be able to write anything. So don't kill anyone, don't light anyone on fire, but by all means keep writing. Have a writing practice. I find that writers in particular, people who make music or art, or writers in particular, are people who need to express themselves, and they feel much better when they do their art or their writing. So by all means, have a writing practice and honor yourself with your writing, and then get it out into the world. Figure out how to do that and get it out into the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're working on now that you want to tell us about before we go?
You know what? My next book is part of the Like a Boss series. So I published with Ben Hale, who's a very successful fiction writer. We wrote Write Like a Boss, and then we published Publish Like a Boss, and now Market Like a Boss comes out in February. So
Love that. Love
yes.
that. Well, I want to thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody who watches will have no excuses not to pursue their art and try to make a living at this.
I hope so.
Well, thanks again. You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.